Hey beautiful people, welcome back to Angelic Embrace, where we document and narrate the glorious and life-changing near-death experiences sent in by you guys. It is greatly appreciated. So sit back, relax, know that you are loved, and let's get into today's near-death experience story. Consider subscribing and watching to the end to find out what happens. Around 7 o'clock on a Monday morning in October of 2019, I was on the road on the way to work. My car was involved in a collision with another vehicle whose driver had strayed into my lane. My coworker, who was traveling in the vehicle with me, had no injuries at all. On the other hand, I was quite perplexed by what had taken place, as well as why I was hacking up blood and finding it difficult to breathe. I can still feel the calm that pervaded the environment, even though the rain was pelting me in the face. I wasn't experiencing any significant discomfort at the moment. My coworker was attempting to hold my head erect while also saying that the ambulance was on its way, and it is one of the last things I remember before I lost consciousness once more. At that instant, I had the sensation that my spirit was departing my body. I was trying to make sense of what was going on as I looked down at the carnage, while at the same time realizing that nothing was making any sense. Before I saw a funnel forming around me, the amount of time that has gone is hard for me to estimate. I was attracted to it since it radiated a great deal of pleasant energy. As soon as I stepped into the funnel, I had the sensation that I had returned home. I seemed to myself as if I were still in my body, but suddenly everything around me seemed to vanish. I came to the realization that my physical form was really a container for my soul, which stored my awareness and made it possible for me to be aware of the physical world around me. As I proceeded further down the tunnel, both the warmth and the light became increasingly intense. It seemed as though this energy was embracing me from all sides. It loved me an incredible amount in that way. I had reached a point where I was perfectly content with both the person that I had become and the life that I had led. The idea of moving on seemed okay with me. I had overcome my fear and no longer felt it. Because of the intense brightness of the light, it was quite difficult to see anything on the outside of this funnel. On the other hand, I could tell that familiar folks were there to greet me when I arrived. I had a sneaking suspicion that these were relatives and acquaintances who had passed away in the past. As I continued to make my way toward the exit of this funnel, I became aware that the origin of this energy was gradually taking shape. I believe this was my guardian angel. Even though we did not speak to one another, I was immediately aware of a great deal of information. My watchful cherub urged me to make my way back to my physical form. I am conscious of the fact that I did not wish to go back. The funnel turned into a doorway, and if I went back out into the open air, the temperature was quite low. I could feel the beginnings of the pain that I was going to feel returning to my body. I knew it was only a matter of time. When I turned around to look out the window, I saw the paramedics removing me from the vehicle. An elderly woman was seen leaning against the ambulance and signaling for me to come back down the stairs. It dawned on me that no one else in the room could see her. When I refocused my attention on the origin of the energy, I discovered that my guardian angel had vanished. Everything else started to fade away into the background. While I was being transported in the ambulance, I abruptly came to while I was there. I was suffering from tremendous agony. I had no idea what was going on when I got to the hospital, so I was caught completely off guard. I seem to recall that my family was there to say their goodbyes to me at some point. I was at a loss for an explanation. Then I lost consciousness once again, and while I was out of it, I got a fleeting sensation of the energy that was on the other side of the tunnel. I came to the conclusion that there was a purpose behind it being necessary for me to go through this experience. After being unconscious for a number of hours, I awoke at a medical facility. I had made it through a stage 4 aortic tear as well as a number of other significant ailments, all of which I am still battling with at this point. My whole life has been turned upside down as a result of this encounter, and I now view life in an entirely different light. During the time that I spent in the hospital, which is a whole other narrative, I had to overcome a lot of challenging obstacles. I am making an effort right now to get this tale out there so that it can be read and, possibly, assist other people. If someone is anxious or afraid of dying, I hope that reading my tale may help calm their nerves and soothe their fears. My experience has taught me that it is truly the calmest and most lovely thing that could ever take place. I am now aware that all of us are related. The following is another example of a close call with death. During the month of August in 2004, my oldest son's wedding was scheduled for Saturday. His soon-to-be bride had done some research and located a good hotel for their out-of-town visitors. Even though the majority of our visitors were scheduled to arrive on Friday, we chose to treat it like a true vacation. Together with my wife and our 3 kids, I made it into town. I was aware that I was feeling poorly on Wednesday night, and it was almost as if I was starting to come down with the flu. Therefore, we spent the following few days with my son and a few of the other visitors at the house. We were going to see the sights, spending time with his soon-to-be family, and buying our tuxes. I was feeling worse and terrible. I came down with a fever the night before the wedding, and my stomach was in a terrible knot the entire time. Because my son works as a technician in nuclear medicine, we spent a considerable amount of time discussing my symptoms and trying to figure out what may be wrong. Following the wedding, we agreed that I should obtain a medical examination as soon as possible. I thought it would be best to obtain a checkup at the nearest hospital. The nurse at the emergency department inquired as to what was wrong with me. I informed her that I was concerned that I could be suffering with the flu. They positioned me on the test table and began prodding my tummy in various directions. I was running a fever of 104 degrees Fahrenheit. They collected some blood from the patient and continued to prod and poke him. She followed that by taking a rubber mallet and tapping the bottoms of my feet. The agony in my abdomen was tolerable when she touched my left foot, but when she tapped my right foot, it threw me through the roof. She diagnosed me with appendicitis and said there was a possibility that it had ruptured. They contacted a surgeon and arranged for an appendectomy to be performed on me as soon as possible. After reviewing my test findings, the surgeon informed me that he was quite certain that it had ruptured when he arrived at the scene. After providing me with some confidence, he brought me into the operating room and began the procedure. The next thing I remember, Jesus is standing right next to where I was sleeping. He was dressed in a long white robe and was glancing in my direction. He was not a ghost or any other kind of apparition that could be seen through. He inhabited a corporeal body, had dark hair, and stood around 1.5 meters tall. He gestured his hand toward me and said, "I want to answer your request." I took the hand and we continued talking. Because I was perplexed, I hesitated to respond. After that, I took his hand, and the next thing I knew, we were both standing on top of a mountain together. We were surrounded by a dense fog, and the ground beneath our feet was grass. My senses appeared to be heightened, and I was really able to count the individual blades of grass. This is a very strange occurrence. He let go of my hand and remained to stand next to me when he did so. My attention was pulled to a light out in the distance. The light appeared to be expanding in size and intensity, and it started projecting beams of light in the direction of Jesus and myself. The light beams moved more slowly at first, but they eventually picked up intensity, frequency, and speed as they progressed. Each light beam was approximately 4 feet in length, and as it passed us, it created a buzzing sound. When one of the beams struck me in the head, it appeared to slow down as it traveled through my body. After a few minutes of this, the fog gradually began to lift, almost as if someone were drawing back a curtain. The fog lifted, revealing an openness that stretched from my right to my left. The first thing that caught my attention was the breathtaking view of the sky above us. The colors were really stunning and bursting with intensity. Then I spotted flowers growing on the ground in front of us, as well as trees growing on mountains that were further away. The trees all had excellent forms and resembled lovely, green redwoods in appearance. It appeared as though diamonds had been placed at the very tip of each of the trees. After colliding with the apexes of those trees, the light beams shattered into a myriad of minuscule light beams. It seemed unreal how bright and brilliant all of the things were. After that, I spotted a valley below us that was situated between our peak and the mountain that was further away. Even though the fog was still present, I was able to make out a metropolis just below its surface. Golden in hue, several of the rooftops were rounded and ornately decorated. My vision kept going back to the first point of illumination. During that time, Jesus spoke the phrase, "It is the glory of the Lord." I was still asleep when he said it, but the sudden impact of falling to my knees was enough to wake me awake. A total of 12 days were spent with me at the medical facility while I was there. During that time, he spent 4 days in the intensive care unit. The physician informed me that it was the most severe instance of appendicitis that he had ever observed. However, after making that statement, he proceeded to tell me that he had seen worse, but that the patient's situation was the worst he had seen. While I was in the hospital, I made sure to keep a journal so that I could fulfill my promise to God that I would share my story with others. And I came away from my time in the hospital with quite a few tales to tell. Some of the tales were quite distressing, but when I think about it, most of them were funny. In the end, I decided to write a book, which I wrote in the form of fiction. I had the impression that discussing my own convictions on heaven would be simpler if I did it this way. I have no doubt in my mind that the experience I am having right now is taking place in a genuine location. I had no idea that the book would sell so many copies, it far beyond my wildest expectations. I can now say that I have sold copies of the book in 26 nations all over the world. A couple further thoughts on my experience when Jesus claimed that he wished to answer my petition. I never really understood what he meant by that statement. I think he was referring to the times when I prayed as a young child, when I was first becoming familiar with God and his existence. When my grandfather passed away, I remember praying to God to show me heaven since I was young and just beginning to learn about religion at that point in my life. I wasn't very sure about things at that point in my life, so I begged God to show me heaven. I also recall watching the Charlie Brown Christmas special and being quite interested in what Linus had to say about the birth of Jesus while he was giving his speech. My spine tingled at the words, "The brightness of the Lord shined all around them," which he spoke at one point. It has always puzzled me, and it continues to do so even now, to imagine what the splendor of the Lord must appear to be like. Just one more thing. A number of years passed after I had my NDE before I came across a chapter in the Bible that discussed how heaven does not require light from the sun because heaven is illuminated by the glory of the Lord. This is some incredible stuff. The fact that Jesus chose to fulfill a request I'd said as a child some 4 decades ago and reveal himself to me as glorious makes me feel extremely unique.